husband and I hadn't spoken a word to each other in a year. When he finally returned to the States and tried to initiate a truce, he reached out to take my hand right in front of his subordinates. I instinctively flinched, pulling away. When he tried to slide his arm around my waist, I shoved him off entirely. Later, a friend asked me why I wouldn't just give him another chance. I couldn't help but vent. Devin and I are basically strangers now, I told her, swirling my drink. Being in the same room as him gives us absolutely nothing to talk about. The silence is so suffocatingly awkward, I want to dig a hole through the floorboards and bury myself. My friend's expression suddenly contorted. Her eyes darted frantically to a spot just over my shoulder. I turned around. There he was. Devin stood frozen a few feet away, his face completely drained of color. Well, if it was awkward before, it was a full-blown catastrophe now. I could have dug a trench straight to the Earth's core. Devin Frost and I had been locked in a bitter stalemate for 12 months. For the entirety of that year, he had been in Switzerland, accompanying his ex-girlfriend and her parents while her father sought experimental medical treatments. He had played the devoted proxy son perfectly. Now that he was back in Chicago, he was the one lowering his head, asking for peace. Before he left, he hadn't said a word of goodbye. But a year is a long time. The blinding, white-hot rage I used to feel had mostly burned out, leaving only a cold pile of ash. When we fell apart, things had gotten incredibly ugly. I had just lost our baby. My hormones were crashing, my heart was shattered, and I was bleeding out my grief in the form of cruel, jagged words. I don't care that Ella's father is dying, Devin, I had screamed at him. She spent years trying to ruin other people's happiness. This is just karma catching up to her. I remember the way Devin's features had hardened. The usual calm, detached elegance he carried himself with vanished. He narrowed his eyes, and the look he gave me was absolute ice. Joyce, he had growled, his voice dangerously low. How can you be so vicious? That was the last time we saw each other. The very next day, he boarded a private flight to Zurich with Ella and her parents. Since returning a month ago, Devin had been playing the role of the attentive, perfect husband to a terrifying degree. My friend leaned in, whispering, Joe, he's been back for weeks. Are you really going to keep icing him out? He's gorgeous, he's a tech billionaire, and trust me, there is a line of women waiting for you to drop the ball. She wasn't wrong. Devin came from old money and built his own empire on top of it. The line of women wanting to date him probably stretched all the way to Paris. But he had been gone for a year, a whole year. So much had happened in the empty spaces he left behind. During that first month, I used to stare at my phone, desperately hoping for a call, a text, a sign. It never came. Over time, I had reflected on my own behavior too. I knew what I said about her dying father crossed a line. I forced a stiff smile now, looking at my friend. But I'm serious. Being around him is just agonizing. We have nothing to say to each other. It's so awkward I can't breathe. That was when she looked past me, her eyes widening, telegraphing disaster. What? I asked. Is there something in your eye? She just blinked harder. I turned. Devin's tall, imposing frame was rigid. His skin was pale under the dim lighting of the venue. My mouth twitched in a grimace of sheer mortification. His dark eyes locked onto mine, a storm of turbulent emotions swirling in their depths. Without a word, he closed the distance between us and wrapped his hand around my wrist. I tried to twist away. I couldn't. His grip was an iron vice. He marched me straight to the elevator, down to the parking garage, and practically folded me into the passenger seat of his Aston Martin. I watched him from the corner of my eye. His jaw was clenched so tight I thought it might shatter. A year ago, our marriage was a well-kept secret. The media didn't know the CEO of Novatech was a married man, but they certainly knew about his storied, dramatic past with Ella. The moment the engine purred to life, the Bluetooth synced to a local celebrity gossip podcast. Recent sightings of Novatech's Devin Frost strolling through a scenic village in the Swiss Alps with his former flame, Ella, and her parents. Frost has spent the better part of the last year abroad, reportedly funding her father's treatments. Sources close to the couple say the old spark is definitely back. Devin slammed his hand against the console, killing the audio instantly. I didn't yell. I didn't demand an explanation the way I would have a year ago. There was simply no point anymore. A year ago, the first snowstorm of the season. I was walking to the train after work. The drop in temperature had been sudden, catching the city completely off guard. The sidewalks were a sheet of black ice beneath a dusting of white. I slipped. It was just a fall, but the sheer volume of blood that followed was terrifying. Against the pristine white snow of the pavement, the bright, violent red was blinding. Bystanders and a coworker who had been walking behind me panicked. I laid there, entirely numb, save for a heavy, agonizing pulling sensation in my lower abdomen. The ambulance took me to Northwestern Memorial. The ER doctor looked at me with a mix of clinical detachment and pity. You're miscarrying, she said. Did you know you were pregnant? I shook my head, the room spinning. I tried to call Devin. It went straight to voicemail. My parents had retired to Florida. Devin's parents were on a cruise somewhere in the Mediterranean. When the nurses told me I needed a family member to sign the consent forms for the D&C procedure, I dialed Devin's number again, and again, and again. Nothing. In the end, with a shaking, bloodless hand, I signed the surgical forms myself. Hours after the surgery, as I lay staring at the ceiling of my recovery room, my phone buzzed. A single text from Devin, on a business trip. 3 days later, I was discharged. While waiting for the elevator, I overheard two nurses whispering at the station. Did you see the guy in the VIP oncology suite? What's his name? Oh, he's a big deal, the other replied. CEO of some tech firm, Devin Frost. He is incredibly handsome. Does he have a ring? He's got a girlfriend. That older man he's pushing around the courtyard in the wheelchair, that's his future father-in-law. I felt the floor drop out from under me. When I walked out into the main lobby, I saw him. Devin was standing near the entrance, flanked by the hospital's chief of oncology and a team of specialists. Standing right beside Devin, looking up at him with tearful gratitude, was Ella. He hadn't been on a business trip. While I was bleeding out our child on an operating table, he had gone completely off the grid to secure top-tier medical care for his ex-girlfriend's parents. The night I got home from the hospital, I waited for him in the dark. When he finally walked in, I asked him point blank why he was at the hospital with Ella. He frowned, loosening his tie. Are you having me followed? I dug my nails into my palms to keep my voice steady. You lied to me, Devin. You said you were out of town. I saw you with Ella this morning. She's your ex. Do boundaries mean absolutely nothing to you? Devin looked at me, his expression infuriatingly calm. Joe, yes, she's my ex, but she isn't my enemy. He spoke to me with the slow, measured cadence of someone explaining a math problem to a child. I was at the hospital because her father is critically ill. When you called me, I was genuinely out of state meeting with a medical board on his behalf. I didn't lie to you. But for the entire month leading up to that day, I had noticed the shift. I'd wake up at 2 a.m. to find the space beside me empty. Devin pacing the hallway with his phone pressed to his ear. Once, walking past his home office, I heard muffled, panicked crying coming through the speaker. I saw my husband's broad silhouette standing in the dark, his voice a soft, intimate murmur. I know, I'm here. Don't be scared. I'll come over first thing tomorrow. He hadn't come back to our our bed that night. He left before the sun came up. I knew the voice on the other end was Ella. Devin, I said, my chest tight. She's been texting you for a month. You come home past midnight. You're always with her. She knows you are a married man, so why does she keep pulling you away? This is an emotional affair, and she knows exactly what she's doing. Devin's eyes turned glacial. Joyce, stop. She is not trying to ruin our marriage. The immediate defensive way he shielded her was the spark that ignited my breaking point. Her father was just diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, he said sharply. Can you stop being so relentlessly cruel for 1 second? A wave of intense, suffocating grief crashed over me. I had laid in an ICU bed alone. I had signed the papers to remove our dead child from my body alone, and he had been holding her hand, moving mountains to find doctors for her father. I don't care, Devin, I screamed, tears finally spilling over. It's karma. It's what she deserves. The second the words left my mouth, I saw the exact moment I lost him. A dark, terrifying fury settled over his features. His voice was a whip of cold air. Joyce, how can you be so vicious? He didn't say another word to me. He just looked at me, a look of profound alienation and disgust. Then he walked. That one screaming match birthed a silence that lasted a year. When Ella's father took a turn for the worse, she decided to seek alternative therapies in Europe. Devin went with them. The day he packed his bags, he glanced at me one last time. His eyes were devoid of any warmth, just a barren, freezing indifference. I knew right then that we were over. We didn't file for divorce. We just stopped existing to each other. Months later, when I heard through the grapevine that her father's condition was deteriorating, a pang of guilt actually hit me. I sent Devin one single text. I'm sorry for what I said. It was out of line. I shouldn't have spoken like that. He left me on red. The radio broadcaster bringing up the Swiss Alps had just sucked all the oxygen out of the car. I didn't really care about the specifics of his time with Ella anymore. Over the past year, Ella's Instagram had been a carefully curated exhibition of her life abroad. I saw the photos of Devin consulting with world-renowned surgeons. I saw the discreet snaps of his expensive watch resting on a cafe table in Zurich. Over the holidays, she posted a snowy landscape from a luxury ski lodge in Chamonix, 2 mugs of hot cocoa on the balcony rail. Devin finally spoke, his voice slicing through the heavy silence. His gaze was fixed dead ahead on the road, unapologetic. Joe, her father is stable now. I gave a short, jerky nod. Oh, okay, that's good. The car descended into the underground garage of our condo building. Devin threw it in park, unbuckled, and turned his body to face me entirely. Do you have anything you want to ask me? He said, his voice dropping an octave. I will explain everything. I don't want you making assumptions. I forced the corners of my mouth up into a bright, brittle smile. Nope, no assumptions here. His eyes darkened instantly. Devin's sudden reappearance had completely derailed the fragile peace I'd built in my routine. Living alone, I had gotten used to wandering the apartment in just a flimsy silk slip after my evening shower. It was the middle of July. When I walked out of the bathroom that night, he was standing in the hallway. His eyes dropped, lingering on the thin fabric clinging to my chest. My face caught fire. I grabbed my robe from the hook, darted back into the bathroom, and aggressively tied it around my waist. When I re-emerged, fully covered, I cleared my throat and suggested we officially sleep in separate rooms. Devin, I'm dealing with a massive project at work right now. Early mornings, late nights. I don't want to wake you. I told the housekeeper to make up the guest suite for me. He frowned, the line between his brows deepening. He stared at me in silence for a long time before speaking. What time do you leave tomorrow? I'll drive you. I waved my hands frantically. No, it's fine. We work in opposite directions. His gaze grew heavy. It's on my way. I have a meeting near your corporate park tomorrow. I blinked, desperately searching for a lie. Oh, well, I actually have off-site client meetings first thing in the morning, so I won't be at the office. It was a flimsy excuse, but it got him to drop the subject. I woke up at the crack of dawn. Devin was a creature of intense habit. He worked out every morning at the exact same time. To avoid him, I had to either leave the house before the sun rose or wait until he was in the shower. I couldn't be late today, so I was up at 6 a.m. When I tiptoed into the kitchen, a tall, broad-shouldered silhouette was standing by the espresso machine. Hearing my footsteps, he turned his head. You're up, he noted smoothly. Eat breakfast. We hadn't been alone like this in ages. He had only been back in the condo for 3 days. In the old days, we managed breakfast and lunch on our own, but dinner was sacred. We always ate together. For the past 72 hours, we hadn't shared a single meal. Being in this sprawling kitchen with him made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The social media algorithm is a cruel, psychic beast. Even though I didn't follow Ella and had never met her in person, my Explore page faithfully delivered every single one of her posts to my screen. To anyone looking at her grid, they didn't look like two people who broke up years ago. They looked like star-crossed lovers who had finally found their way back to each other against all odds. After a year of total silence, Devin and I had deteriorated to the point where I felt like an intruder in my own home. Standing in the kitchen, under his intense scrutiny, I felt like the mistress. I felt like I was the one encroaching on Ella's man, even though I was the one wearing his ring. Our eyes met. I quickly snatched a piece of dry toast from the rack and speed-walked toward the foyer. I kept my head down as I shoved my feet into my heels. Suddenly, the scent of cedarwood and cold morning air washed over me. He was standing right next to me. Sit down and eat, he commanded softly. I shook my head.
The door slammed behind me with a hollow echo that followed me all the way into the corridor. I didn't stop walking. Not when my heel caught slightly on the carpet. Not when my pulse roared so loudly it drowned out everything else. Not even when I heard my name low, controlled, unmistakably his cutting through the space behind me. Joyce. I kept going. The elevator doors were open, like they were waiting for me. I stepped inside and hit the lobby button too hard, as if force could make distance happen faster. The doors started to slide shut. A hand caught them. Of course it did. Devin Frost stepped in. Devin Frost stood there in that composed, suffocating way he always did when he refused to let a situation end on anyone else's terms. His jaw was tight, but his voice came out even. You don't get to run every time we're in the same room. I stared straight ahead at the elevator doors like they were suddenly the most interesting thing in the world. I'm not running, I said flatly. I'm leaving. A pause. The kind that always meant he was choosing his words carefully instead of reacting. That's still avoidance. That did it. I turned my head slightly, just enough to look at him. And what would you call the last year? Silence hit the elevator like a physical weight. The doors opened into the parking garage too soon. Too bright. Too real. I walked out first. He followed. Of course he did. His car was already waiting, still parked where it had been last night. The Aston Martin gleamed under fluorescent lights, like nothing in our lives had ever gone wrong in it. Like grief didn't exist in expensive machines. I stopped a few feet away. I'm not getting in, I said. You are, he replied immediately. That one word, so calm, so certain, almost made me laugh. I turned fully now. You don't get to disappear for a year with your ex and her family and then start issuing commands like nothing happened. At that, something flickered in his expression. Not guilt. Not quite. Annoyance. He exhaled once through his nose. Controlled. You're still repeating that version of events. That's because it's the only version I lived. His eyes sharpened. And just like that, the calm CEO mask cracked enough for something older to show through, something colder. Ella. She was dying, he said. I know what her father was, I shot back. That doesn't explain why I was alone in a hospital signing papers for our dead child while you were playing savior in Switzerland. That landed. Not loudly, but completely. The garage felt quieter after it, like even the air had stepped back. Devon's gaze dropped for half a second, just one, but I saw it. The exact fracture point where control met memory and didn't hold. I didn't know, he said. You didn't know I was bleeding out? My voice shook now, despite everything. Or you didn't know I mattered enough to check? His hand tightened briefly at his side. I tried to reach you. That voicemail. I let out a sharp, humorless breath. That's your defense? Another pause. Then softer, dangerously restrained, I came back the moment I could. I stared at him and realized something with a clarity that felt almost clean. We weren't arguing about facts anymore. We were arguing about importance. And neither of us was willing to lose that argument. I stepped back. No, I said quietly. You came back when it was convenient enough to leave them. His eyes snapped to mine instantly. That's not. But I was already shaking my head. No more explanations, Devon. I'm done collecting pieces of a story that still somehow makes me the one who got left behind. For the first time, he didn't interrupt. That silence, his silence, was worse than anything he'd said. I turned away and walked. This time, he didn't follow immediately. That should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like the calm before something I didn't want to name. When I reached the exit ramp, my phone buzzed once in my hand. Unknown number. One line. Come back to the car. We're not finished. No signature. No doubt who it was. I stood there for a long moment, staring at it, the garage noise fading into something distant. Then I deleted the message. And kept walking. The silence after I deleted the message didn't feel like peace. It felt like pressure building behind a sealed door. I didn't go back to the car. I didn't answer calls that started coming in 10 minutes later. And I definitely didn't respond when the message changed from a command to something closer to restraint. Joyce, don't do this. As if I was the one escalating things. As if the last year had been a misunderstanding instead of a slow, deliberate erasure of me from his priorities. By the time I reached my office building, my hands had stopped shaking, but only because they'd gone numb. I told myself I was done waiting for accountability that would never arrive. And then I did something I should have done a long time ago. I called my lawyer. The divorce papers were drafted within 48 hours. Clean. Clinical. No dramatics in the language, just dissolution, division, signatures. It almost offended me how simple it looked on paper. Like a marriage could be reduced to formatting. My lawyer slid the folder across the table. Given the assets involved, this will be loud. That's fine, I said. My voice surprised even me. It didn't wobble. He studied me for a second. Do you want to attempt negotiation first? I looked down at the first page. Then I thought of hospital ceilings. Of silence. Of Switzerland. Of Ella's name appearing in places it never should have been. No, I said. File it. The filing hit the system by evening. By nightfall, it was no longer private. And by morning, it wasn't controllable. Devon's world didn't just react, it detonated. His legal team reached out first. then his board advisors. Then 3 separate PR crisis firms that didn't usually agree on anything except urgency. And finally him. A message, not from an assistant this time. You filed without speaking to me. I stared at it for a long time before replying. We stopped speaking a year ago. No response came immediately. But I knew him well enough to know that silence wasn't retreat. It was calculation. The next time I saw him was in a conference room I didn't agree to enter. Yet there he was. Already inside. Waiting. Devin Frost stood by the glass wall overlooking the city, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up like he'd been there longer than me, and like he intended to stay longer still. No Ella this time. No Switzerland distance. No phone calls in the dark. Just him. Fully present. Which somehow felt worse. You filed, he said. I did. A beat. His eyes flicked over my face like he was looking for something that used to be easier to find. You didn't even give me a chance to respond. I let out a quiet laugh, but there was no humor in it. You had a year. That landed. Not dramatically. Just final. He turned slightly, exhaling through his nose. This isn't how we end things. I shook my head. It already ended. I'm just making it official. At that, his expression shifted, something sharper beneath the control. You think signing a document fixes what happened between us? No, I said simply. It stops me from pretending it didn't. The room went still. Even the city outside looked too bright, too indifferent. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then, quieter. You're punishing me. That finally made me look at him properly. And I saw it, the assumption, buried so deep he didn't even realize it was there. That everything I did was still somehow about him. I nodded once, slow. No, I said. I'm choosing me. The words didn't feel powerful. They just felt overdue. His jaw tightened. And for the first time since this started, he didn't have an immediate counter. Because there wasn't one that didn't sound like ownership. By the time I left the building, my phone was already lighting up again. Lawyers. Media. Unknown numbers. And one final message from him, sent seconds before I stepped into the elevator. If you walk away from this, you don't get to come back later. I stared at it. Then typed back. I'm not coming back. And turned my phone off. The silence after I powered my phone off didn't last long. It never did when it came to Devin Frost. Devin Frost didn't wait for permission to be present in my life. He just changed the shape of it until it had room for him again. By the next morning, he'd escalated. Not emotionally. Practically. My lawyer called before I even finished my coffee. Joyce, he said carefully, his legal team has already filed an emergency motion to freeze asset separation. I stared at the cup in my hand. On what grounds? A pause. Marital dispute involving alleged misrepresentation of intent. They're arguing the filing was made under emotional duress. I almost laughed. Almost. Of course they are. By midday, it wasn't just lawyers anymore. It was optics. Devin's company released a carefully worded statement about stability during ongoing personal matters. No mention of divorce. No acknowledgement. Just enough ambiguity to keep markets calm. And yet somehow, everyone understood anyway. Because by afternoon, I wasn't just his wife filing for divorce. I was the variable disrupting the image of control he'd spent years building. And that made me visible in a way I hadn't been in a long time. I didn't see him that day. Not in person. But I felt him everywhere. In the sudden tightening of my office security protocols. In the receptionist's hesitant expression when I arrived. In the way my building manager asked if I wanted privacy adjustments for my residents. He wasn't showing up physically. He was adjusting the environment so I'd feel him anyway. A man like Devin didn't chase. He surrounded. That night, I finally went home early. Too tired to think. Too drained to pretend I wasn't affected. The condo was dark when I stepped inside. Too dark. No city glow reflecting off the glass. No soft ambient hum of systems. Just stillness. I froze halfway into the living room. Something was wrong. Not broken in wrong. Intentional wrong. Then I saw it. A single envelope placed neatly on the kitchen island. No logo. No stamp. Just my name. Joyce. My stomach tightened immediately. I didn't touch it at first, because I already knew. When I finally opened it, there was no dramatic letter. No emotional plea. No apology. Just a copy of something legal. Filed faster than mine had been. And at the bottom, one handwritten line. If this is what you want, I won't stop you. But don't mistake silence for surrender. My throat went dry. Because that wasn't a threat. It was a line drawn in a different place entirely. Not between husband and wife. Between two people who had stopped pretending they were on the same side. A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around. And there he was. Not in the doorway this time. Inside. Like he'd never left. Like the condo still belonged to him in ways paperwork hadn't erased. He looked exhausted. Not the polished exhaustion of boardrooms. Something deeper. Human. I told you I wasn't finished, he said quietly. My grip tightened on the paper. You don't get to keep rewriting this. His gaze didn't move. I'm not rewriting anything, he replied. I'm trying to stop you from destroying it without understanding what it actually is. That made something in me snap, quiet, controlled, final. I understand it perfectly, I said. It's a marriage where I was alone until it became inconvenient for you to stay gone. His expression shifted at that. Just slightly. Like I'd hit something he couldn't deflect with logic or money or distance. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he stepped closer. Slow. Measured. Not invading space. Testing whether I'd still let him share it. I didn't come here to fight you, he said. I let out a breath that shook more than I wanted it to. That's funny, I said. Because it feels like you brought your entire life support system with you. His eyes flickered. And for the first time since all of this began, he didn't have an immediate answer. Just silence. Heavy. Honest. Uncomfortable. The kind that couldn't be negotiated. Only endured. The silence stretched long enough that it stopped feeling like part of the argument. It started feeling like the truth itself had entered the room. Devin Frost didn't move closer again. But he also didn't step back. That alone felt intentional. I saw the filing, he said finally. I know, I replied. A pause. Then, quieter. You did it fast. My grip tightened on the envelope in my hand. So did you. That landed harder than I expected. His eyes flicked down for a fraction of a second, like he acknowledged it, even if he didn't like how it sounded out loud. I didn't file against you, he said. I let out a short breath. You filed against the separation. That's the same thing with better branding. Something almost like frustration moved across his face. But it wasn't anger at me. It was restraint. Constant, practiced restraint, like he was holding himself in place by force of will. I'm trying to protect you, he said. That made me laugh once. Sharp. Unkind. From what? My own decision. His gaze held mine. From what this becomes once it leaves private control. There it was again. Control. Everything always came back to that word with him. I shook my head slowly. You don't get to decide what I need protection from anymore. For the first time, something in his expression cracked, not dramatically, but enough that I noticed the shift in real time. Not arrogance. Not calculation. Something closer to fatigue. Like he was tired of being misunderstood, but had no language left that wouldn't sound like ownership. I'm not your enemy, he said again. But it didn't land the way it used to. Because I'd heard that sentence before. In a hospital hallway. Over Ella's father's charts. Over my missing place in his life. So I stepped forward this time. Just one step. Enough to make him still. You keep saying that, I said softly, but you keep choosing her crises over my life. His jaw tightened immediately. That's not what this was. Then explain it, I said. No shouting. No shaking. Just exhaustion sharpened into clarity. Explain why I had to find out I lost our child alone while you were unavailable. Explain why I was standing in a hospital signing consent forms with no one answering their phone. Explain why your silence always had an exception for her. The air between us changed. Not louder. Heavier. His gaze dropped for a second, just a second, and when he spoke again, his voice was lower. I didn't know how serious it was until it was already over. That sentence should have meant something. It used to. But now it just felt like distance dressed as regret. I called you, I said. I called you until I couldn't anymore. He didn't respond immediately. And when he did, it wasn't defense. It was honesty that arrived too late to fix anything. I know. That was the problem. He knew now. Not then. And now wasn't where I needed him to exist. I exhaled slowly, setting the envelope down on the counter between us like it was the last remaining piece of the marriage we were dividing. I'm not doing this again, I said. His eyes lifted immediately. Doing what? Explaining my pain to someone who only understands it after it becomes history. Silence again. But this one was different. Less tension. More finality. He looked at me for a long time, really looked. Not like a CEO. Not like a strategist. Like a man trying to find a version of himself that still belonged in the story he'd already damaged. Then he spoke, quieter than before. If I let this go, he said, there's no version of you that stays in my life. I didn't answer right away, because that was the first honest thing he'd said all night. And it wasn't manipulative. It was just true. Finally, I nodded once. I know. Another silence. This one didn't demand resolution. Just acceptance. He looked away first. That small movement carried more weight than anything else he'd done so far. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Not softer. Just resigned in a way I hadn't heard before. Then file it, he said. My breath caught slightly. That wasn't surrender. It was release. The kind that comes when control stops being worth the cost. I studied him for a long moment, waiting for the twist, waiting for the correction. It didn't come. So I picked up my phone. And for the first time since this started, I didn't hesitate before confirming the final submission. The system beeped. Done. No undo. No pending review. Just finality sitting quietly between us like a closed door. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, then stepped back. Not leaving in anger. Not storming out. Just exiting a life he could no longer influence. At the door, he paused. I hope, he said, without turning around, that it gives you what you think it will. I didn't respond. Because I didn't trust myself to. And when the door finally clicked shut behind him, the apartment didn't feel empty. It felt unfamiliar. Like something had been removed that had been shaping the walls all along. And for the first time in a long time, I could breathe without waiting for the air to be taken back. The divorce didn't drag after that. It accelerated. Within a week, lawyers stopped negotiating and started executing. Assets were split, trusts were untangled, and every shared account that once represented us turned into neatly labeled his and hers. No more arguments. No more interruptions. Just systems doing what they were designed to do when emotion was removed from the equation. Devin Frost didn't reach out again after that night in the condo. Not directly. But I still felt the shape of him in the aftermath, board decisions shifting faster than usual, media narratives tightening, his name disappearing from the more personal angles of gossip cycles that had once obsessed over his relationship with Ella. It was like he'd stepped out of the spotlight without asking anyone's permission. And let the silence speak for him instead. The final hearing was short. Almost unreal. 2 signatures. A confirmation from the judge. A sentence that ended something that had taken years to decay. No drama in the courtroom. Just closure on paper. When it was done, my lawyer closed the folder gently. That's it, he said. I nodded once. But it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like standing in the aftermath of a storm that didn't announce when it stopped. You just eventually realized you were dry again. Outside the courthouse, the city was loud in the way it always was, unbothered, moving on immediately. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. Unknown number. I stared at it. For a second, I almost didn't open it. Then I did. One message. It's done. No name. But I didn't need one. I looked up across the street. And for a split second, I saw him. Not approaching. Not waiting. Just standing there at a distance he chose on purpose. Watching. Not trying to change anything anymore. Just acknowledging that it had changed. Our eyes met. No one moved. No one crossed the road. No one reopened anything. Then a horn sounded somewhere behind me, and when I looked back, he was gone. And for the first time since everything began, it didn't feel like I'd lost something. It felt like it had finally stopped following me home. The divorce moved fast after that. No more emotional back and forth. Just execution. Within days, lawyers finished what the marriage had already stopped being. Signatures. Assets split. Accounts separated. Everything reduced to clean legal lines that erased the shared life like it had been carefully archived and deleted. Devin Frost didn't fight it anymore. Not in court. Not in messages. Not in person. It was like he'd shifted into silence on purpose, still present in the background of everything, but no longer stepping into it. Even the media narrative collapsed quickly. The perfect billionaire marriage angle died overnight and got replaced with vague speculation about irreconcilable differences. Nothing dramatic enough to chase. Nothing messy enough to feed on. And then, it was over. A judge signed it. A clerk stamped it. A file was closed. Just like that. No final confrontation. No dramatic apology. No last-minute confession that changed anything. Just the end of a system that had already stopped functioning long before anyone admitted it. Outside the courthouse, I didn't look for him. And this time, he didn't appear. No waiting. No watching. No distance-filled presence pretending to still hold meaning. Just absence. Real absence. The kind that doesn't echo anymore. My phone stayed quiet. And for once, that quiet didn't feel like something missing. It felt like space. And I kept walking forward without turning back. Epilogue, Devin Frost. I signed the final document alone. No meeting. No lawyers in the room explaining implications I already understood. No audience. Just ink, paper, and the quiet acknowledgement that something irreversible had already finished long before this moment. Devin Frost had built entire companies around control, timing, and precision. But nothing about this had been controllable. Not really. The media called it a clean divorce. That was convenient language. It suggested order where there had only been damage carefully contained behind closed doors. They didn't know about the hospital. They didn't know about the voicemail that never got answered in time. They didn't know that silence can accumulate into something heavier than any argument. People assumed I left. Or that I chose something else. That wasn't accurate. What I chose too late, too often were systems, responsibilities, obligations that always made sense on paper. And she stopped being something I could reduce to paper. That was the part one didn't calculate correctly. I heard about her occasionally after. Not directly from her. Never from her. That was consistent, at least. She rebuilt quickly. Not loudly. Not for attention. Just forward motion. The kind that doesn't invite interruption. I recognized it. Because I used to think that was what strength looked like. Now I wasn't so sure. There were moments I almost reached out. Not to fix anything. That word stopped making sense. Just to acknowledge what had been real before it became unsalvageable. But every time I stopped myself. Because there is a point where contact stops being about repair. And starts becoming about refusing to accept an ending. The last time I saw her was accidental. From across the street, I didn't cross. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and chose not to acknowledge it. Either way, it didn't matter. We had already stopped belonging in the same direction of time. I stayed where I was long after she disappeared from view. Not because I expected anything, but because for the first time, there was no next step that required immediate execution. No meeting. No crisis. No voice on the other end of a call needing saving. Just stillness. I thought about what people would say if they knew the full story. They'd probably assign blame. Or symmetry. Or meaning that made them comfortable. But there wasn't anything symmetrical about it. Only choices made too late to matter equally. I left eventually. Not dramatically. No decision moment. Just movement. Like gravity reasserting itself after everything else stopped pulling. And if there was one truth I understood clearly now, it was this. Some losses don't end when the papers are signed. They end much earlier. On the day someone stops waiting for you to become who you said you were going to be. And by the time I understood that, she had already stopped waiting.